Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally.
Is Cliff Kelley, the governor of talk radio, the icon of radio throughout the world.
Chauncey Spencer II and I, again, share a special relationship. His late great father, Tuskegee Airman Chauncey E. Spencer, took me as a child on my first airplane ride.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is something that people need to see. Often we don't, do the things to show how great our people are. It changes the paradigm of how people think about us, about the collective consciousness of what it means to be us.
And we've been having great conversations about trying to get more African Americans into aviation. And we got a bill that we're trying to get passed that would allow the Pell Grant to be used to help finance aviation education.
This is where I started with this entire conversation by saying, if it were not for America's Heroes Group, I would have given up. So I want to get all my accolades out the way on behalf of America's Heroes Group. Ms. Glenda, thank you. Thank you for encouraging me to press on. I would encourage you all to support this organization. One thing for sure, America's Hero Group is out there. Ms. Glenda will take the time. Ms. Glenda Smith will take the time to listen to you and to steer you in the direction that you need to go.
Thank you for watching another episode of America's Heroes Group, where we provide education about resources and information for our veterans, military, and their family.
We have in our chase bags, we have a care package of hygiene, we have shaving equipment, we have razors, and for the women we have the same personal hygiene items for them as well. And we want to say thank you for their service. This is Chase Bank. Thank you very much.
People in the neighborhood, free haircuts, the service, the food. Look good. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service. Okay.
On behalf of Cliff Kelley, America's Heroes Group, we sincerely thank Chase Bank for coming where it matters to help homeless veterans have a hot meal today and a care package. We are sincerely grateful for this partnership. Yes. Yes.
Welcome to America's Heroes.
From the Talk of Chicago. I am Vietnam veteran host Cliff Kelley. America's Heroes Group is a live streaming podcast, global platform, radio, print, and digital media broadcast show that empowers change agents through intentionally disseminating information, resources, and referrals to empower our military population.
And welcome to America's Heroes Group. You just heard our host, Cliff Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have our partner today, Jesse Brown, VA Works, America's Hero Group Roundtable. October is Breast Cancer, Mental Health, and National Disability and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We have Jada in the studio today with her pink on, celebrating breast cancer awareness, doing everything she can with her red wristband and everything, or pink wristband and all that. Today is October 8th, 2022, Saturday, 4 o'clock as always. And we have a great show for you today. We're going to talk about some serious topics. On the topic of breast cancer, we have a panelist, Dr. Sarada Deshpande. She's a board member certified internist and has been on the Women's Health Medical Director at the JBVA, the Jersey Brown VA, since 2013. And we're going to talk about breast cancer awareness and where that has taken us today. That's something on everybody's mind because it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Doctor, are you with us?
Yes, this is Sarada Deshpande. Thank you for having me. Jesse Brown thanks WVON to be able to speak on breast cancer awareness in this month of October, which is a breast cancer month. Thank you.
Now, you have a particular focus in women's health, and you also want to now tell us about the importance of screening. How important is this? We're going to go into a lot of details about this topic, particularly after the fact that the pandemic kind of made a lot of women stay home and not get their checkups. Something like 30% of women did not get their checkups during 2020 during the pandemic. Let's talk about screening. What is important about that?
Absolutely. This is a great question. Breast cancer is the second leading cause of cancer death in women following the lung cancer. Besides skin cancer, breast cancer is the most commonly diagnosed cancer amongst American women. And if you look at statistics, 1/8 of the U.S. women will develop invasive breast cancer over the course of their lifetime. This is a serious concern, but has a 99% survival rate if it is detected very early. That's the reason screening is extremely important.
So tell us about the different stages of breast cancer. From doing some research, I didn't realize it was a stage 0. I've heard of stage 1 through stage 4, but breast cancer has a stage 0 and it goes to stage 4. And particularly in that, tell us about DCIS, which is, from what I understand, ductal carcinoma and Sistah. Is that right? And also
right.
Triple negative breast cancer, because those are two extremes. Tell us about those two things and kind of give us an idea about those different stages of breast cancer.
Okay. So the first question, DCIS, it's a cancer which is in situ, ductal carcinoma in situ. This is a cancer that is still within the cell membrane of the cell. So the goal of the good thing is if we take care of this, DCIS will prevent the occurrence of invasive breast cancer. That is the DCIS. And then you wanted to know the staging, right?
From stage 0 to stage 4. So because we're talking about screening, so getting to it early is critical. So when you're in stage 0, that's something like is that DCIS? Is that correct?
Right. Stage 0 is DCIS. Let me get 1 second.
And then we move on to stage 4, which gets really critical at that point. And then we worry about things spreading once you get to stage 4. So understanding the different stages might be helpful because I think a lot of people have kind of gotten complacent because we hear about breast cancer all the time. And then with the pandemic, people staying home, a lot of people haven't really been getting the screening. People are doing self-checks at home, but they're not getting the screenings, is what I understand.
Yes. Stage 1 breast cancer is what we call local disease. And, this is a very early stage breast cancer, and the treatments are very the treatments that are offered at this stage are conservative therapies, So staging is extremely important, and getting the diagnosis very early on is very important too. And like you mentioned earlier, a lot of patients during the pandemic have not gotten their screening mammograms, or for that matter, other screening tests for other things too. Then what else I should say about the staging?
So then, when we get into stage 3 and stage 4 breast cancer, how fast can someone progress? Because I've heard stories. Katie Couric, for example, one of the anchors on been around forever on NBC. She talked about her experience with breast cancer, and then she said that she just forgot to do it for 6 months, and she's been getting them regularly because her husband died from colon cancer. So she went and got tested after 6 months. And she had cancer. She had breast cancer, and it wasn't in the later stages, but it was still had progressed enough where it was very, very serious.
Right, but most patients who present with breast cancer usually have disease that's confined to what we call to the breast with no or much metastasis. Usually, these are the patients that are called stage 1 and 2. that the disease is confined to the breast. And then the 3 and 4 are the metastatic breast cancer. Like you mentioned, the metastatic breast cancer is a poor prognosis. And if this cancer is detected very early on, 99%, there's a survival rate of 99%.
Wow.
And then the COVID-19, I agree with you, especially, because of the delays in the treatment, screening, and everything, with the social distancing and a lot of, the way we delivered care has changed during the pandemic. So, yeah, there were some issues which were real during this pandemic.
So how young should a woman be, or how young can a woman be before they start thinking about getting screenings?
Right. That's a great question. Number one, we usually follow American Cancer Society guidelines. So according to American Cancer Society guidelines, average risk women should get screening mammograms every year starting at the age 45. And 45 to 54, they all should get up to every year. And women over 55 should be screened every other year. That is biennially. And women should have opportunity to continue to screening annually, even with this age group, with 45 to 54. There is no end limit for screening mammograms anymore as long as women are healthy and their overall health is good and they have a life expectancy of 10 years or longer. So we start at 45. And in fact, we can start the discussion at 40 itself.
Wow. Now, one thing I noticed on the Mayo Clinic, on their front page of their website, when they talk about breast cancer, they talk about the importance of self-screening, but they mention that self-screening in their eyes wasn't necessarily as effective as other types of getting actual screening, a physical screening in an actual facility. What is your take on getting screening or doing self-exams, self-breast exams? And if you're doing self-breast exams, what's the proper way to do it?
There is most experts agree now breast exams are not indicated anymore because this has, there were several studies looking at this, and this has led to unnecessary biopsies and things like that. So for screening, we do not recommend anymore self-breast exams. But breast cancer screening, the best method we have right now is a screening mammogram. And this is used to look for any early signs of breast cancer, even when patients don't have any other symptoms. And this mammogram is actually an X-ray picture of the breast. During this examination, the breast is placed between two plates. There are two views taken, one from the top, one from the side. And sometimes, depending on what the screening initial mammogram shows, the radiology doctor might recommend for the testing called a diagnostic mammogram, where there are, if there is any findings on the initial screening mammogram, which involves more views than two. Then sometimes we also use ultrasounds to diagnose as well as to perform breast biopsies if the diagnostic mammogram shows anything. And women who are at increased risk of at least 20% over their lifetime of breast cancer, they receive the special testing called breast MRI. Breast MRI catches cancers that are harder to detect by mammograms.
Now, was the 3D mammogram, is that the gold standard today for getting mammograms? Because there's, what I've read, there's 3D mammograms and there's standard mammograms. What does the Jesse Brown VA use, and then what is the most effective way?
Yeah, Jesse Brown VA Hospital currently do not have in-house mammography, and we refer our patients into the community through a process called community care referral process, where a doctor places an order, and there is a department called community care who reaches out to the patient, trying to get these patients appointments in the community. But we also have a mammography care coordinator in the VA at the Jesse Brown, who actually works with the patient, the community care, and the outside, the mammography vendor.
So one thing I noticed too also is that according to the VA statistics, and also according to what the research says, the women veterans are 20 to 40% more likely to get breast cancer. So this leads me to this question. So is breast cancer more so, when I try to find information on the causes of breast cancer, it led me to think that maybe there was more family history or possibly genetic, but then a lot of people get breast cancer with no history of no family history whatsoever. There's not even finding a lump when they do a self-exam. So what do veterans need to do, women veterans in particular, in order to take advantage of what the VA offers at Jesse Brown?
That's absolutely right. According to the American Cancer Society, some of the risk factors are family history, first degree, second degree relatives having cancer. But like you mentioned, most of the women who come with breast cancer do not give family history of breast cancer. And at the same time, even if someone has all the risk factors or one or more risk factors, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will develop breast cancer. Then it also depends on the genetic makeup. The breast density is one of the risk factors, and hormonal factors. And there are several other risk factors like alcohol consumption and being overweight after menopause, as well as not being physically active. What is Jesse Brown doing? The first thing any woman veteran can do is getting an appointment with the primary care doctor. That's where it starts. And Jesse Brown VA Hospital as women physicians who are designated as women's health providers. We have a women's health clinic. We have a women veteran program manager. We also have a mammography care coordinator at the Jesse Brown VA Hospital. Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to ask, we had planned to have one of the licensed clinical social workers here with us today, but she wasn't able to make it. But the question I wanted to ask her, maybe you can answer this question, is how important is it to advocate for women's health? Women's health program that you have at Jesse Brown VA is critical, but how important is it, and why is it necessary to advocate for women's health?
Absolutely. It is extremely important because women veterans have unique medical issues, mental health issues, psychosocial issues, and at Jesse Brown, we have designated women's health providers who do take quite a bit of training courses, online. What is called mini residencies and things like that to specialize. And we actually have a comprehensive women's health care center in our at Jesse Brown VA. We have social workers that work with us. We have psychologists that work with the primary care providers, along with gynecologists. We are lucky to have 2 gynecologists with us, and one of them is actually a very specialized gynecologist called urogynecologist. We have a lot of resources at Jesse Brown Women's Health Care Clinic, and another important thing is we are very excited that recently we were told that we've been approved to initiate mammography breast imaging services on site, and also to get this comprehensive mammography program so that we can get the veterans the screening mammograms and depending on what the screening mammogram, what they need, to offer all these on site at Jesse Brown.
So one thing that we talked about earlier in this show, we mentioned that 45 is the right age to start getting mammograms for women. However, because of the fact that a lot of women veterans are getting breast cancer at such alarming rates, and most women who are in service, they're joining typically when they're in their 20s. And we've seen cases of women with breast cancer. I've seen a case with 27 where someone passed away doing research, who had no symptoms and they have been doing regular exams, seem relatively healthy, but unfortunately did not get screened, and then it metastasized. And when she went to go get it checked out, next thing it was hard to treat or hard to get on to conquer. Is it a good idea for women veterans in particular to maybe think about getting screened earlier versus waiting till 45?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing is having a discussion with the primary care provider so that they can come up with the risk assessment, that they look at several things in that questions. There's a questionnaire for that. And based on that, once they decide what is the risk, then we can, move from there. Because even for average risk women, we should start discussing, the women patients should have given the opportunity to start discussing at the age of 40. And definitely women with higher risk, like with family history and genetic mutations and things like that, they should be starting screening early on, and not just with mammograms, in that case with MRI of the breast.
So I got two questions that offer the last question we just talked about. So getting a screen early, we know that's critical. So how is Jesse Brown how is Jesse Brown's view on preventative maintenance or preventative screening on just in general? Because it seems like the more we do things early with our health, when we start just finding out what the problems are, getting the screenings, whether it's breast cancer, whether it's colon cancer, whether there's other different things, we do better in life in general because we can detect it and get treated earlier. So is that something that's a focus of Jesse Brown, the preventative side? Because we typically think in the regular world, we don't do anything until we get sick. We wait till we get sick, then we go to the hospital, we go to the emergency room, but we don't put a lot of time and effort and attention into trying to maintain and prevent certain things from happening to begin with.
Absolutely. It's not, I agree totally 100% with you, not just breast cancer, all the general health screenings that patients need, depending on their age and sex and things like that. The best thing is we at Jesse Brown, we have a comprehensive primary care health that patients are seen, and we do have, depending on their age, again, age-appropriate screenings and things like that. So Jesse Brown, in fact, actually has a group that works, that looks at all these screening metrics and things like that. So it's very important. The first step is for any women veteran is to get an appointment with the primary care. And we do know that patients, when they get primary care appointments, they do better care because the primary care doctor does a comprehensive evaluation and try to get these patients whatever they need, whatever it may be, the breast cancer or diabetes, or for that matter, whatever that is, yeah. So the first step is coming to the primary care clinic and seeing the primary care doctor.
Now, this was the question I didn't really want to ask you, but I'm going to ask it because I think it is important. And the reason why I didn't want to ask this question is because it lets people, in my mind, and I'm judging in some way, it makes people more complacent because they wait, once again, like based on my last question, they wait till the last minute to get checked, and then sometimes it's hard to treat something when you let something get worse. But what are the signs and symptoms of breast cancer? If a woman is having to the point where they start seeing signs and symptoms, what are the things to look out for, and what should they do at that point?
Right. See, our goal is to find them even before they have symptoms. That is what we were talking about earlier with screening. But what are some of the symptoms and signs of breast cancer? One is new lump in the breast or in the armpit, dimpling of the skin, discharge from the nipple, or pulling of the nipple, or redness in the breast area. Or if there is any swelling that they see, or pain in the breast, or change in the size or the shape of the breast, these are some of those. Any of these symptoms, they should talk to their primary care provider right away, to their healthcare provider.
And once again, how often should the mammogram be done or screening be done?
And the screening, according to American Cancer Society guidelines, the screening, every woman should have regular screenings every year at the age of 45. From 45 to 54, they should be screened annually, and women 55 and up should be screened biennially. And women should continue screening mammograms as long as their overall health is good and they have a life expectancy of 10 years or longer. So there's no cutoff for this, but please continue.
And this is my last question. We have about a minute left. So if you ever had to diagnose or actually tell someone the bad news that they had breast cancer?
Hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
I couldn't hear you 1 second before. Can you please repeat the question?
We got about 50 seconds left. But what
Okay.
have you ever had to diagnose someone with breast cancer or tell someone the bad news that they had breast cancer?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah, breast cancer. We have a mammography care coordinator in the clinic. We actually monitor all breast cancer diagnosis patients, making sure that they get the necessary treatments. Yes, of course. I've seen many women with breast cancer diagnosis, and I have given the diagnosis myself to the veteran in my clinic. Yes.
And the reason why I wanted to ask that question, but we ran out of time, is that I wanted to know what a woman felt. What's the reaction that someone gets typically when they are told that they have breast cancer? You know, when I did a colonoscopy, and the doctor told me, he said, you know what, most men would give me a sigh of relief. He said most men die with colon cancer. They don't die of colon cancer. So we got to treat this. We got to get this taken care of. But that was clean. So, doctor, thanks for your time. I appreciate you coming on our show. Sarada Deshpande, doctor, board certified internist, and has been in the Women's Health Medical Director for JBVA Brown VA since 2013. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
This is America's Heroes Group.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally.
Who is Cliff Kelley, the governor of talk radio, the icon of radio throughout the world.
Chauncey Spencer II and I, again, share a special relationship. His late great father, Tuskegee Airman Chauncey E. Spencer, took me as a child on my first airplane ride.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is something that people need to see. Often we don't, do the things to show how great our people are. It changes the paradigm of how people think about us, about the collective consciousness of what it means to be us.
And we've been having great conversations about trying to get more African Americans into aviation. And we got a bill that we're trying.
Chicago Regional Office of Veterans Benefits Administration, the Jesse Brown VA. October is Breast Cancer, Mental Health, and Natural Disability and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Today is Saturday, October 8th, 2022. Our host is Cliff Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have our panelists on the line, Tracy Kukla Lewis. She's a Chicago Regional Office Training Manager, oversees training and compliance. And we're going to talk about the character of discharge from the military, the benefits available without a discharge, and how to apply for a discharge upgrade. A very sensitive topic among people in the military who have not had an honorable discharge. We're going to go into that and get more details about it. How you doing, Tracy?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. So tell us, first of all, tell us about what the different types of separation, if you could rank them. So maybe a better way to do it is kind of go through it and kind of look at what the different types of discharges are, and then kind of talk about what they mean. Because a lot of people who listen to this program are civilians. They have no idea what we're talking about when we say discharges. They think if you either got honorable or dishonorable discharge, but there's really like 8 different kinds of discharge. Is that correct?
Correct. So for our purposes at the VA, when a veteran is discharged from service, they get a DD-214, and the DD-214 will specify the character of their discharge. So you typically want to see honorable, but then there's general, under honorable conditions, and uncharacterized. And then you have other than honorable conditions and bad conduct discharges. So for VA purposes, everything for us is good. the under honorable conditions, general, uncharacterized, those are good for our purposes. We don't really look at those. The ones that we focus on are the other than honorable or the bad conduct discharges.
So when you look at those, what are you looking at them for?
So the reason that we're looking for them is what happens is if a claimant files a claim, we look at the type of character of discharge that they have, and then we go from there. So if we find out like why they were discharged. So there's regulatory bars and then there's statutory bars for VA benefits. The regulatory bars, typically the discharges or the reasons that we see are willful and persistent misconduct and like moral turpitude. Those are the two big ones that we see as a basis for the discharge. The regulatory bars, a person would not be eligible for VA compensation benefits, so the monthly payments, but they would be eligible for VA medical treatment. Okay. For those that have a statutory bar discharge, they aren't entitled to anything for VA purposes. So they're not going to get the monthly compensation benefit, and they're not going to get the health care benefit either.
So to be clear,
so that's why it's a...
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, to be clear, so if you have on your DD 214, if you see a bad conduct or a dishonorable, that you can't get any medical benefits at the or any VA, basically.
It depends. We have to look into the circumstances behind. We have to determine if it was a regulatory bar or a statutory bar that's involved. So we actually look at the actual conduct involved, and then we make a decision. Then we type up a decision and we send that to the claimant.
Okay. And then what
so
are
depending upon the results of that?
Okay. So what are the negative consequences of a punitive discharge, like bad conduct or dishonorable, or anything really less than honorable? How does it affect you in the civilian world as far as job opportunities, things like that?
So the civilian world, I am not familiar with. I've worked at the VA for 21 years, and so I'm focused all on compensation benefits. That's been my focus for the last 21 years, and I'm not a veteran myself.
Okay. So what in the Jesse Brown VA system or the VA system in general, what benefits are available then to honorable people versus anything less than honorable that a person might miss out on? I know education benefits come into play. And I know also we just talked about some medical benefits, but what other things are there? Like, for example, maybe the VA guarantee loan, for example.
Yeah, like the GI Bill and home loans and stuff. Again, like that's all centralized. So I'm not familiar with the requirements. I'm assuming that if they don't have the honorable, that there may be issues with them being entitled to those benefits. I just know that for VA purposes, for healthcare, compensation purposes. That if you have other than honorable discharge or a bad conduct, then they won't be entitled to compensation benefits for sure, and they may or may not be entitled to VA treatment.
So then what are their options? So a person gets less than honorable, or maybe they get a bad conduct. What can they do to try to get that changed so they can get benefits?
Sure. So what they need to do is they should first file a claim with the VA, and they can do that with an easy form if they've never filed a claim before, or if they have filed a claim before, they're going to need to file that 200995, that supplemental claim, and start there. And then they're going to list whatever conditions they're claiming, a left knee, a back, hypertension, whatever. Then we go from there. So then we get their DD 214. We do that for all cases, and we look at what's the character of their discharge. If we see that it's other than honorable or bad conduct, we get their entire personnel file and we ask for all the facts and circumstances regarding that discharge before we make a decision. We will send a letter to the claimant saying, hey, your DD 214 shows this other than honorable or bad conduct discharge. And we give them an opportunity to explain if there's any extenuating circumstances or basically any opportunity to explain the basis for their discharge. And we give them 60 days to respond.
Now, from what I understand, go ahead.
So then once that 60 days expires, whether or not they respond, then we make a decision, a formal decision. And we can, our avenues are, we can find their them honorable for VA purposes only. So we can't overturn what the military has their discharge as, their character of discharge, but we can kind of do it for VA purposes only. So if we find them honorable for VA purposes after reading all that evidence, and we say, okay, we're going to find it honorable, like minor conduct, say, then that if we find it honorable for VA purposes, then they will be entitled to VA compensation benefits, that monthly payment, and then they're also entitled to VA health care. If we determine that they are dishonorable for VA purposes, then we have to make a decision as to whether or not they're eligible for health care. So if they're dishonorable for VA purposes, they cannot get that monthly compensation benefit, but they may or may not be able to get the VA treatment. And so all of that will be in a decision.
Okay. So what makes first of all, talk about this. What's the difference? Go more in detail, because it's kind of a little blurry in the sense of what the difference is between upgrading or getting change in the character of your discharge versus getting an upgraded discharge. I know upgrading your discharge is very difficult, from what I understand, but changing the character is something that is a lot easier and usually what you recommend first.
Right. So they can do two avenues simultaneously. They can pursue the VA route through us, through the Veterans Benefits Administration, and file their claim and let us do a decision just for VA purposes only. It doesn't affect the outside world, just the VA world. But then they can also simultaneously basically dispute, if they feel like their discharge was unfair for some reason, they can go and file with their military service agency, their branch, and dispute their discharge that way and ask for like an upgraded discharge. So there's two different forms that we send claimants when we're doing this, because we encourage them to do this at the same time that we're processing their claim. They can file a DD form 293 and a DD form 149. And those forms are very detailed, and they give you the specific address depending on the branch of service involved as how to ask for an upgraded or a changed discharge. Because, again, we can't change that characterization that the military gave them. We can only kind of do it for VA purposes. And I know this has been like a big upcoming topic lately. And so if a claimant had like PTSD or a TBI, or let's say they had some sexual assault or harassment going on, or if they felt that their discharge was unfair because of their sexual orientation, then we highly recommend that they pursue that avenue with the Department of Defense as well, because they have more options than we do. And if the Department of Defense changes their character of discharge, that's the better avenue for them, because then that affects, the GI Bill, that, helps them with, getting federal jobs or state jobs, veterans preference, all that. So that would be, we tell them kind of pursue both avenues simultaneously.
Okay. And then are you seeing more veterans talk about maybe going into the VA to get help as far as changing the character or upgrading their discharge because of the legislation and things around the country regarding marijuana use? Because marijuana was strictly forbidden in the military, but now it's becoming legalized across the country. So how has that changed the dynamic?
So, yeah, I've definitely seen in my 21 years at the VA a dramatic increase in people filing supplemental claims, that 0995 form, where in the past, maybe a long time ago, we made a decision that we found their service dishonorable for VA purposes. And just a lot more filing claims that have the bad discharge. Maybe in the past they just didn't bother to file. But I know that this is a big hot topic right now. I know the Federal Registrar in 2021, I believe.
America's Heroes Group is proudly sponsored by attorneys.
So we had a little break in the commercial. Sorry about that. So you continue. You were saying that you've seen an uptick over the last few years, definitely with people trying to get their discharge changed and also trying to get their character changed.
Correct, and I believe there's more of a encouragement all over to consider TBI and PTSD, things that were kind of not diagnosed way back when, like when Vietnam was happening. There really wasn't, the PTSD diagnosis didn't really exist. TBI is kind of a new medical thing that we're seeing now, that they're recognizing, I should say, more and diagnosing more. Same thing with the sexual orientation issue. So we're definitely seeing a lot more. The federal registrar I had seen in 2021, they're proposing to actually basically revamp the VA regulations when it comes to character of discharge, and it seems like they're heading towards being more liberal. So I foresee in the future that if they do in fact implement what was proposed, that we're going to see a lot of claims dealing with character of discharge.
One of the things, I know we can't talk on this topic, but one of the things I found is doing research on this, because I know people who've been in the military have dishonorable discharges and have less than honorable discharges and so on. It is tough for a lot of guys. I remember when I had a good friend of mine who passed away. He was in the Army right after Vietnam. And he was saying that when he joined the military, his family had all been in the military, similar to mine, and he said to me, his father told him, is that if you go into the military, which they actually discouraged him from doing, which they had military history in their family. His father was in the military. He said, whatever you do, come home with an honorable discharge. If you do nothing else, I don't care if you become a captain or if you become this or private your whole career, but come home with an honorable discharge. And for job opportunities and things like that, and what I understand is that is actually public record. It's particularly if you have a punitive discharge or anything that has anything like a bad conduct or something that had a punitive element attached to it, because it might end up in the court, and that's all public record. So when people do background checks for housing, for jobs, they can sometimes pull that, although it's not always common where they get that information, but that actually can have a negative impact on your job career, your housing situations, all kinds of things in the civilian world.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right, and like you were...
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No,
like you had mentioned before, how has it changed with, now marijuana is legal in the state of Illinois. We're kind of seeing that change too, slowly, that of becoming more liberal and kind of looking back at what were the policies way back when. So I always encourage people, if they feel that their discharge was unfair or they really had extenuating circumstances that were never taken into consideration during our initial decision, like maybe our initial decision said it's dishonorable for VA purposes, come back in with a 200995 form and tell us why. Explain something, because we can go ahead and look at that other decision and maybe we can change it. Maybe we can find it honorable for VA purposes, or if we deny Chapter 17, maybe we could grant it. So I always encourage, there's no harm. It doesn't cost anything to file a 20995, a supplemental claim, and dispute something that was previously denied or a decision that you don't agree with.
Now, how hard is this process? What's the timeline typically from what you've seen from your years of experience? And is it necessary or helpful to get help from a veteran service organization or maybe even an attorney? Is that even something that can be done?
Yeah, I have a high regard for the service organizations because they're highly knowledgeable about our VA benefits and what is needed to substantiate a claim. But, I just say that the process, I think the important thing is a lot of times when we send that letter saying, hey, explain the reasons behind your discharge, we give them the opportunity. A lot of times they don't respond at all. And, we weren't there. Those of us processing the claim, we weren't there. If something was going on, like if there was racial tensions or, if someone was discriminated against because of their sexual orientation, we have no way of knowing that because likely that's not documented in their records, right? So we need them to write us a statement or request a hearing and tell us that information so that we can consider it. Because if they don't tell us that, we don't know about it and we can't consider it. We've also kind of moved towards reviewing BVA decisions because some of the regulations they're kind of vague. So like what is willful and persistent misconduct, right? That's kind of vague. And what is moral turpitude? Those are two regulatory bars, but the regulations aren't very they don't describe them in detail, so that results in like inconsistent decisions. And I know that the VA is now moving, they are recognizing this, and they're moving towards, okay, let's look at our regulations and let's see if we can make them more specific for our claims processors that have to abide by those. And that way we can make more consistent decisions nationwide.
And what's the timeline typically? So if someone's going to initiate this process, what should they expect realistically before they get a resolution?
So it's going to be a minimum of 60 days because any time that we see that there's a bad discharge that exists, we have to send this due process letter that basically says, hey, you have 60 days to request a hearing or tell us about your bad discharge. So that's a minimum of 60 days right there. We cannot make a decision unless they waive that 60 days. But after that, it's not too long of a decision for the actual character of discharge determination itself. Once we make that decision, then the rest of the claim may take longer. So if we find them honorable for VA purposes, or we say, hey, it's dishonorable, but you can get VA treatment, then that extends the length of the claim because once that decision is made, then we send it to the next stage in the process and saying, do we need to schedule a VA exam now? What conditions are they actually claiming? And then continue it as like a regular claim.
And then once you do this, let's say they get denied, is there an appeal process?
Yep, there's an appeal process. They can take any of the 3 review options that we have available. They can do the 0995, that supplemental claim. They can do the 20-0996, and that'll go to our Decision Review Center, DROC, or they can go directly to BVA.
And so what are some tips that would make a successful application? So they submit their paperwork, and it seems like they would also maybe need some documentation or some type of written narrative as to what happened, why they should be considered for an upgrade or for a change of character. What are some of the things that you can give them as tips as to what they need to have a successful claim?
So for these specific claims, I would say please respond to our letter, and it may be difficult, but we need you to tell us if there's extenuating circumstances behind the way you were discharged. If you feel in any way it was unfair, like I said, if you had PTSD or you suffered a TBI and that caused you to do things you normally wouldn't, or you suffered a sexual assault in service and that resulted in going downhill and making bad decisions, we need to know that because we are allowed to take that into consideration. And I know it's difficult things to talk about. So that's why like you had mentioned, maybe a private attorney or a service organization may be beneficial because they may be able to help them word that, or type that up or support them while they're doing that. Our public contact team also can help veterans do that. But I know there's things that are hard to talk about, but we need them to talk about them. Or request a hearing. If they request a hearing, that's basically the same thing as typing up a statement, but you can have a hearing with one of our decision makers and explain, hey, these are the extenuating circumstances that happen. Please consider it.
And on that note, and people are afraid oftentimes that if they go and try to create or try to get something changed, that's going to be an adversarial process. I got a speeding ticket here in Chicago. There's with these speeding cameras, which everybody's trying to protest against because they're crazy. And so, the process of, I had all this evidence lined out. I had actually it was a speed camera ticket. Okay, I actually went to the intersection. This camera gives out the most tickets in the state of Illinois.
Yikes!
Yeah, and it's actually been. They've had news reports on it. There's actually here at WVA1. There's actually a campaign against it here at WVA1. Mark Wallace, who has done a show here. He's been trying to lead a campaign about it. I went to my hearing, and I brought actual photographs, their own photographs, by the way, that the city of Chicago took of me, supposedly, which you can't see me driving the vehicle, but that doesn't matter to Chicago. And I measured out all the angles and distances of how fast I traveled in the time that they said that I traveled, and it was obvious I wasn't speeding. You look at the math, I was looking at math, but it was an adversarial process. They did not care. It was like I was fighting against someone instead of looking at the evidence and saying, hey, let's talk about this and get to a resolution. So if a veteran goes to the process, is it going to be adversarial where it's you against them, or are they kind of trying to figure out what is the best solution, what is just and fair for our veterans?
Right, and I hope no one ever sees our process as adversarial. I am sure it's hard not to see. It is a complex process. It can be complex, but that's why we have service organizations and private attorneys to help through the process, or a public contact team if they come into the regional office. It shouldn't be adversarial at all. We just need, like I said, the veterans to speak and tell us their story, so that we can take it into consideration. Like, we try to give them the benefit of the doubt. You know, it's not our money that we're giving away, so we try to say yes when we can, you know, following our regulations as much as possible. So I don't want anyone to see it as like, oh, they just want to say no. No, because we're not a for-profit organization, you know.
Like
it's not coming out of our company's, yeah. So we want to help veterans. I mean, I want to thank the veterans that are listening right now, or service members that are listening to your show. Thank you for your service. I admire veterans so much, and that's why I've dedicated my career towards working for them.
So let me ask you this question. When you have National Guard veterans, Army Reserve veterans, regular Army veterans, and Marines and so on, is there a difference as far as benefits access? I'm not sure if you're the person to ask this question, but since you're dealing with benefits and things of those natures, is there a difference between the different types of benefits that reservists and National Guard get versus regular military service members?
Not for VA compensation purposes. You know, the only difference would be that if someone's currently in the Reserve or National Guard, yes, they can file a claim for compensation benefits. But if they do their drill weekends, we stop their pay. Like, we can't pay them VA benefits at the same time that they're getting if they get called on to active duty, or they have their inactive duty for training or something. We kind of keep track of those throughout the year, you know, until they're finally retired or whatever. But then they know, and we tell them that we have to stop their benefits so they're not double paid during that time. But that's the only difference. I mean, they can still file claims that, you know, retired veterans get.
And one other thing I've read, and this is in actually some of the old military books I had or whatever from a long time ago. So officers, is it true that officers have a different process than enlisted soldiers or enlisted members?
For the VA, nope. We just treat them all as veterans. We treat them all the same.
Okay, but for maybe perhaps another end, because they said something like that, officers can't be. I had it written down, but officers can't be downgraded in rank, but they can be. They just have but they can be dismissed. But then they can keep a lot of their benefits that they would not get if they were enlisted.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not familiar with, just because I'm not a veteran, so I'm not really sure. And for our purposes, we don't look at that. We don't look at what their rank was. I don't even pay attention to that at all when I process a claim.
So what would you say is the most important thing for veterans to know if they're trying to, if they're thinking about maybe upgrading or getting VA benefits, but they have something less than ARM, but what's the most important thing that they need to know right now?
So file a claim. If we said no a long time ago, especially, file a supplemental claim. You know, society changes, times change, attitudes change, laws change, circumstances change. If you were denied, especially in the Vietnam era, we were much stricter back then. I would say file that 20995 form and just give us a statement. We don't expect you to go out and get all this evidence and things. Just give us a statement saying, hey, I don't think my discharge was fair because of this, or I would like these extenuating circumstances considered, and that's all they need to write. They don't need, a biography. We just need a couple sentences or a paragraph about why they think that we should change that initial decision, and then we should make a new decision. Hopefully it won't stay the same, but it could stay the same or it could change, but we just need something from them.
And I think we have to go back to that previous point you made, which is there are stories out there that are untold, but people have been bottling these stories up for so long. And it's not just the weight of the story or the trauma that maybe they experienced, whether it be because of discrimination or maybe a sexual assault, a military sexual trauma, or even a traumatic brain injury, whatever it might be that might have caused you to do something that was against the guidelines or regulations. But you got to get the courage to step up and actually make your voice heard and actually say to the powers that be, hey, this is what happened to me. And then collectively as veterans, if we can get more of those stories told, maybe we can help change and maybe evolve the military into a stronger fighting force, a stronger, more organized and fair system.
Exactly. It's just that's the biggest obstacle I see right now is getting these veterans to tell us their story, and because some of them it's very sensitive topics, it's difficult, but we need them to tell their story because we weren't there, and we can't consider it because I'm guaranteed a lot of this stuff is not going to be in their records that we have access to. They're not going to say, oh, we treated this person unfairly, So we need them to open up to us or their service organization or the private attorney that's helping them and tell us the story.
And on that note, so we got to wrap it up. So make sure, veterans, you go out and think about your career. If you have anything other than an honorable discharge, think about filing those appeals and those claims. Make sure that you get the recognition you deserve for your service. Thank you for your time. Tracy Clicker-Lewis, he's the Chicago Regional Office Training Manager and oversees training and compliance. So we just talked about discharges and upgrades of your discharge recommendation on DD-214. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
This is America's Heroes Group.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally.
Who is Cliff Kelley, the governor of talk radio, the icon of radio throughout the world?
Chauncey Spencer II and I, again, share a special relationship. His late great father, Tuskegee Airman Chauncey E. Spencer, took me as a child on my first airplane ride.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is something that people need to see. Often we don't, do the things to show how great our people are. It changes the paradigm of how people think about us, about the collective consciousness of what it means to be us.
And we've been having great conversations about trying to get more African Americans into aviation. And we got a bill that we're trying to get passed that would allow the Pell Grant to be used to help finance aviation education.
This is where I started with this entire conversation by saying, if it were not for America's Heroes Group, I would have given up. So I want to get all my accolades out the way on behalf of America's Heroes Group. Ms. Glenda, thank you. Thank you for encouraging me to press on. I would encourage you all to support this organization. One thing for sure, America's Hero Group is out there. Ms. Glenda will take the time. Ms. Glenda Smith will take the time to listen to you and to steer you in the direction that you need to go.
Thank you for watching another episode of America's Heroes Group, where we provide education about resources and information for our veterans, military, and their family.
We have in our chase bags, we have a care package of hygiene, we have shaving equipment, we have razors, and for the women we have the same personal hygiene items for them as well. And we want to say thank you for their service. This is Chase Bank. Thank you very much.
People in the neighborhood, free haircuts, and service and food. Look good.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally. Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally.
Who is Cliff Kelley, the governor of talk radio, the icon of radio throughout the world?
Chauncey Spencer II and I, again, share a special relationship. His late great father, Tuskegee Airman Chauncey E. Spencer, took me as a child on my first airplane ride.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is something that people need to see. Often we don't, do the things to show how great our people are. It changes the paradigm of how people think about us, about the collective consciousness of what it means to be us.
And we've been having great conversations about trying to get more African Americans into aviation. And we got a bill that we're trying to get passed that would allow the Pell Grant to be used to help finance aviation education.
This is where I started with this entire conversation by saying, if it were not for America's Heroes Group, I would have given up. So I want to get all my accolades out the way on behalf of America's Heroes Group. Ms. Glenda, thank you. Thank you for encouraging me to press on. I would encourage you all to support this organization. One thing for sure, America's Hero Group is out there. Ms. Glenda will take the time. Ms. Glenda Smith will take the time to listen to you and to steer you in the direction that you need to go.
Thank you for watching another episode of America's Heroes Group, where we provide education about resources and information for our veterans, military, and their family.
We have in our chase bags, we have a care package of hygiene, we have shaving equipment, we have razors, and for the women we have the same personal hygiene items for them as well. And we want to say thank you for their service. This is Chase Bank. Thank you very much.
People in the neighborhood, free haircuts, the service, the food. Look good.
Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. Okay.
On behalf of Cliff Kelley, America's Heroes Group, we sincerely thank Chase Bank for coming where it matters to help homeless veterans have a hot meal today and a care package. We are sincerely grateful for this partnership. Yeah.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally.
Welcome back to America's Heroes Group, our roundtable She Serves, She Matters with She Voices coalition partner Sistah Soldier. October is Breast Cancer, Mental Health, National Disability, and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Today is Saturday, October 8th, 2022. You just heard our host, Cliff Kelley, at the break. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host, Army National Guard veteran. Executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have our partner on the line. You know her as Sistah Soldier, and she is the U.S. Army veteran and president and CEO of She Vet Inspire. And she's going to talk about how to gain control over negative thoughts and bounce back with confidence. So what can you tell us about that? Soldier, how you doing?
Hey there, I'm doing well, and yourself?
Pretty good, can't complain. So how's the weather where you're at?
Good. Oh, it's beautiful. It's like 91 degrees here in Houston.
That sounds nice. I could get some positive thoughts around that. That
Beautiful
good.
Sunshine, good heat for the skin and the soul.
Yeah, beats 50 degrees. I tell you that much. So tell us, what are some of the things, how do negative thoughts infiltrate our minds?
Ooh, so Sean, negative thoughts will infiltrate our mind because a lot of times we'll sit and marinate in a thought process without really not seeking any type of counsel and really just kind of going in a cyclical cycle of what we know from internally and answering our own questions without really looking into it even more. You know, sometimes we have to investigate a thought process or research which will dispel the myth.
And you talk a lot about self-trust. So tell me about self-trust. How does that play into building your confidence?
So when we talk about building our confidence, we want to look at things like, first let me just start where self-trust starts to deplete and how we end up with a low self-confidence. And one is because we don't keep our promises and our word to ourselves. So if we were to keep the word that we do, the things that we say we are going to do, and keep our promise of what we said to ourselves, then we would have more trust in ourselves and our ability to accomplish that which we said we would do.
Give us an example of that. Before we move on, give us an example when we break that promise or break our word to ourselves.
Okay, so let's the simplest one about maybe losing weight, you know, or I'm not going to self-sabotage myself anymore. We say we're not going to do something, but we fail to put, or we neglect to put things in place that will help divert our decision-making process when it comes to doing that very thing. So if we said we're going to watch how we eat and really go for losing weight, we need to research. We need to see what type of foods that are healthy for us to eat. We need to buy those type of foods or time ourselves, like at nighttime, the amount of food that we're going to eat, the times of the day that we will eat. And a lot of times it's recommended to eat 5 times a day. And when we start that may be a lot to eat because we're so used to eating 3 large meals at one time. So in order to eat 5 meals a day, we have to break that down, like put a timer, put a certain time where we're supposed to eat that snack that kind of takes the place of that third meal in the middle of the day or between lunch and breakfast. Just maybe grab a fruit or something like that. So we have to put a plan in place that will remind us to do that. So when the day is over, we're not feeling like we're so guilty that we didn't follow the plan that we said we were going to do. And then we continue on the same track because we didn't do anything to change those patterns or those habits that we had and reform our thought process. And then we start to sabotage it. And it's just a cyclical thing. So to just keep going back and forth, and then we're no longer trusting ourselves because we didn't keep our word.
So what's the difference between a reason an excuse, because people will say, well, the reason why I didn't, eat this or didn't do that is because the healthy food's too far away and there's no healthy restaurants in my neighborhood, or because it's more convenient and it's costs more money to try to get this healthy food. What's the difference between a reason, or when does a reason become an excuse?
A reason becomes an excuse when it's not an actual fact. And even though a lot of times, a great example, I had a training that I was to participate in, fly to LA for. And when it came time for me to take that trip, the day before, I was beginning to think of all the things that I could have done instead. Or what if my mom needed me, or something happened where, she fell. And so now I started getting worried and concerned. Well, what if all these things started thinking in my mind, what if this happened? What if that happened? And then the next thing I knew was I canceled my trip. And when it was the day that I actually was supposed to travel, I decided, you know what, all of those were reasonings. That did not happen. I made it up in my mind. And so am I missing out on something that could really forward me in my career? So what I did was rebook my flight, went on the trip, took the training, and everything was fine. I made everything up. I made these assumptions and everything up before it even came to happen. So I was reasoning before it actually happened. So it wasn't a reality. So there's a difference between reasoning and making a reason up and actually something happening that could have actually affected what I was doing.
So you mentioned that when you're a child, people have a mind of wonder, and when people are children, they have a little bit a better grasp on just doing things and being able to just have the confidence, or maybe the naivete, because the kids don't know no better. It's going out there and doing things, playing, doing things, building things. How do we have that confidence as a child? How do we keep that as an adult?
So one thing about kids is that when they come here, their mindset is totally clear. It's totally fresh. They have no fears. It's not until the adults start placing their fears and their thoughts and all of these things, their habits, their beliefs on these children, that they begin to worry at a young age and start to think that things are going to happen to them because it happened to auntie and them, it happened to mom and them, and so it obviously is going to happen to me too. So we pour our beliefs into children. If they are the wrong belief, whether they're wrong or good, we still will feed them our belief, our thoughts. And so kids, they don't have that, and they're fearless. As an adult, we have to go back and investigate the things that we are fearful of, the things that we are having these thoughts about that haven't happened yet. And because it happened to someone else, we're scared that it's going to happen to us because this is what they said. So we have to look at and again go back and investigate them so that we could really evaluate whether they are applicable to what we are doing. If they're not, how we build our confidence up is we start to reframe our actions by affirmations, doing research, and getting around positive types of people who are going to lift us up and not so much as beat us down with negative words. We have to be aware of how we speak about ourselves or the words that come out of our mouth, because we frame our future with our words. So if we are more aware of how we are being, then we could grab a hold of how we're being and see if that's going to lead us where we ultimately want to go. If it's not, there's a opportunity to change that course.
So that's amazing, because I think about that, what you just said, and I think about people in business, entrepreneurs, and also thinking about people that are even doing podcasts, for example. The advice of people that train people, and you do this type of work. This is part of your business. Training people to do podcasts and to do things in public media is to go out and do it. You can find 1,000 reasons why, something won't work. But the reality is, you just, even if it doesn't work the way you want it to work, if you don't, the worst way to go about doing something is not starting. Entrepreneurs always say, don't worry about trying to get the perfect business plan first and trying to get this right first and that first, whatever. You got to go out and start doing it. And once you start doing it, then you start to learn how things work. You start to get things going. But the entrepreneurs that typically fail are the ones that are constantly second guessing, constantly trying to go back and perfect everything to make sure that, it has to be this way, or, if I don't do it this way, this bad thing might happen. Sometimes I just got to just do it the way a child might look at it. Just go ahead and just do it.
Yeah. Because if we continue to just keep getting ready to get ready, then we'll never know if it would have worked or not. And in reality, it's when we take that action and we start to see how we want to mold it that we can recognize, well, I don't want that, so I need to try this. And we can see it. We can only reframe it if we know what the outcome is from the first attempt that we try to make and implement things. So it's upon implementation that we begin to see how it actually works. Not only as an entrepreneur, but let's talk about changing job careers. How many times people want to change a career and they don't do it because in their mind, they've already worked it out. It's not going to work because I saw so-and-so, they made the transition and it didn't work for them, so I'm afraid to do it. But maybe that person never researched. Maybe they didn't go and get the additional training that they needed to be prepared for that job. It just was a thought. And if it's just a thought and no action is implemented, no action is taken, then it'll always just be a dream. So we have to look at, well, I can't go by what they did. I literally have to run this course for myself to see what I want, see what my life is supposed to develop, and how am I supposed to be able to contribute to humanity.
I think that's really important what you just said. And then I was looking at doing some research for this show. And I looked at a person I'd never known before, but I seen his work because he actually was one of the coaches for the Alabama, the Alabama Crimson Tide. And sorry guys for mentioning Auburn and Alabama. But anyways, what he was talking about was the fact that negative thoughts were so toxic that in his programs, and this guy's worked with professional NBA players and also even trained military special forces to try to get their minds right, telling them that, hey, when you are doing something, you cannot have these negative thoughts in your mind because these negative thoughts will become self-fulfilling prophecies. If you start talking negative, first of all, when you think about it negatively, then you're going to speak it. And once you say it, you said that it's like a 10 times multiplier when you say it versus thinking it. Because once you get to the point when you say it, then you start to do it. And once you start doing it, it multiplies again. And now you're doing bad behavior. Now it becomes a habit. So he's saying that when you go and you're trying to create positive change, you get to just stop talking negative. Just stop talking negative. Another guy, Steve Harvey, said the same thing. Another guy was saying that if you get a negative thought in your brain, what you should be asking yourself is, whenever that thought comes in, whatever thought it comes in your mind, is how is this thought benefiting me? Is it helping me at all? You're complaining about something, you're doing something. Is it helpful?
Yeah. Is the thought benefiting me? Is it going to take me where I want to go? And not only that, where did I get this thought? Is this something that I thought of, or someone planted a seed in my mind with it because of their behavior, their words, and their actions? Where did it come from? And then we have to look at alternative solutions on where we're going to how we're going to reframe those words and start speaking more positive words that is going to give energy instead of take the energy away from us. A lot of times I have clients that are, feeling depressed or having thoughts of suicide or something of that nature, and I have to share with them, start creating some affirmations. Write down your feelings. Get in touch with those emotions and recognize, do they belong to you or did they come from somewhere else? And so if they came from somewhere else or people were hanging around, then first of all, they don't belong to us. And if they do, then we have the same opportunity to retract them by doing just the opposite of what we're having in our minds as a thought. Reframing it is really important. So there's like, and a good example of that is, so when people say something is hard, you know, that has a certain feel in the body when someone says it's hard. It's like a resistance, a contrast that comes with it. But you could take that same word and say laborious, and then it doesn't feel like anything. You know that that's a word that it could be difficult, but it still doesn't feel like it drag you down. So just a simple word change as when we're speaking can have a huge effect on the outcome.
I think that's so important too. You kind of touched on another area because the words that we're using, like you said, change the word from maybe hard to laborious. When I hear kids speak, I oftentimes try to correct kids. I know today that's like, you know, a cardinal sin to try to correct a child in his language or speech. But when the kids say, I can't do something, I tell them you should never use that word can't. Because you don't know what you can do unless you try. And if you fail, that's okay. It's okay to fail. Failure is going to bring you knowledge and wisdom. It's going to bring you character. It's going to get and actually help you learn how to win. You can't, like Aerosmith said, you got to lose to know how to win.
Yeah. And one of the things that coming from the military, we're not trained to fail. And so we get hard on ourselves, especially after we transition, because it's like I'm a failure. But failure is not a bad thing as people would make it to be, as you just stated. It's actually gaining experience and getting tools for the next thing. Because when we know what we don't want, we know what we do want. And we only know what we don't want if we give it a chance. If we try that thing and it doesn't work out quite the way we expected it to, then we know how we can change it, what we need to do differently the next time. But when we talk about transitioning our mind from feeling like we are a failure and looking at it to whereas, no, it just was a practice. It's something that's preparing me for what I'm supposed to be doing or the next way or a way to get it better, you know?
And that same note, like we learned in the military also, is that when you see an obstacle, don't just assume that it's insurmountable and you can't do it. It's kind of an offshoot that never that train not to fail kind of a mentality, but figure out how it can be done. Don't focus on what can't work.
Yes.
Figure out the ways it might be able to work. If it doesn't work, try something else, try a different route. Do whatever you got to do to get around that obstacle, whether you got to go around it. Maybe the way that they told you, the mission you told you, the way they said to do it, maybe it may not work, might be a mistake. But if you from the experience that you might have, you might learn some stuff, and then the second go around, third go around, fifth go around, finally it might get done. It might be the sixth time or the seventh time. Maybe you've learned something totally different.
And we have to take in consideration that when we are given a mission while we're serving, we have a team. We have people. Everyone knows their position. Everyone knows what they are to contribute. And so, therefore, failure is not an option. And we never fail. We never have anything that happens where the mission is not complete because they provide all of the tools. So when we are on our own, we're now trying to make everything happen like we are a team of one, but there are missing components because there's not someone working each individual part to make it work as a specialized project. So we have to give ourselves some grace and recognize that that's still not failure. It's just we are operating in a different manner, and we have to see it as a whole, but and bring together other people to help us accomplish that, or take it a little slower, and it still can get done.
Veterans, people, make sure you build your team, build your army, build your force, build your squad, whatever you want to call it. So that way you can have success and do the things you need to do. Sister Soldier, it's always been a pleasure to talk to you and get some advice and get information. and also to hear the things you've learned in your business. And also, She Inspires. That is a great organization. We appreciate you.
We appreciate you too. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally.
Who is Cliff Kelley, the governor of talk radio, the icon of radio throughout the world.
Chauncey Spencer II and I, again, share a special relationship. His late great father, Tuskegee Airman Chauncey E. Spencer, took me as a child on my first airplane ride.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is something that people need to see. Often we don't, do the things to show how great our people are. It changes the paradigm of how people think about us, about the collective consciousness of what it means to be us.
And we've been having great conversations about trying to get more African Americans into aviation. And we got a bill that we're trying to get.
Welcome back to America's Heroes Group. This time with our roundtable and partner, Veterans Legislative Voice. October is Breast Cancer, Mental Health, National Disability, and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Today is Saturday, October 8th, 2022. Our host is Cliff Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have a partner on the line, Ms. Stephanie Collada. She is a U.S. Army Reserve Sergeant First Class, veteran and founder and creator of the Veterans Legislative Voice. We're going to talk about reproductive rights for military and veteran women. How you doing, Stephanie?
Doing great. Have had an exciting 2 weeks because I joined a bunch of other women veterans and their organizations in D.C., and it was under the name Uniform Access. And we got to meet with legislators on the Hill, got to meet with their staff, did a march, did a press conference. And then I joined today for the Women's Wave for reproductive rights.
And today across the country, there are a lot of protests going on. We're talking about women's rights and also women's privacy and also right to choose. So tell us what is going on with the movement today. And then we're going to talk about, as always, we're going to talk about both sides of the conversation. But what do you want to tell us that's new and has developed recently?
Well, I'll start at least for the beginning because of Dobbs. So because of Dobbs, there's estimated about 40% of all military members with the capacity to give birth, because we're trying to be inclusive, are located in states with highly restrictive abortion bans. You know, our military don't have a choice of where they live. They have to request permission to travel outside of 400 miles. They also have to be specific of why they are traveling. If the unit or command finds out that they lied, they can get in a whole lot of trouble. But this means that you have to disclose intimate details about your lives to people that don't necessarily have to need abortion care, which is men, because 84% of the military were born male. So they, a lot of them, I'm sorry guys, a lot of men have issues with understanding the full complexity of reproductive health.
I think I think a lot of guys do, myself included. I don't really understand the whole conversation. I understand certain parts of it. One of the things that always is a question, and people that are pro life, for example, will always say that, well, abortion is murder, you're killing a child, an unborn person. So why is that? Why should you have the right to do that? But then the question then becomes, when is a fetus or a cell actually life? That is a topic that it seems like we really don't. It seems like when people talk about this issue, it seems like that's the conversation that always gets side-swiped or kind of sidestepped a little bit. We don't really dive into that 100%. So it becomes an either-or question or either-or conversation. Is it about privacy, or is it about saving a life, or is it about murder, or is it about a woman's right to their own, doing what they want to do with their own body? One question I have, based on what you just talked about, which is, today in the military, if a woman joins the military and becomes pregnant while in service, and they're not married, they're not, it's not like they have a spouse living on base with them or on post with them, they're just a regular woman, doing their service, maybe they're deployed and they get pregnant, what happens?
So it depends on their activated orders. It depends on a lot of things. It also can depend on who the father is, because adultery is still a thing in the military, and many people have been persecuted. Typically, the higher echelon leaders have been persecuted for those, at least, because they were try to be in sexual relations with their subordinate spouses and things like that. But yes, abortion or adultery is still a thing, and those type of things can happen, and it's pretty scary when that happens. When active duty or activated reservists and National Guard, and also activated active duty people, if they're on deployment orders, they can very likely get persecuted, because General Order number 1 is don't have sex. And of course, majority of the time that gets persecuted about this are women. I will say it does not happen very often. It's rare. They typically do it if it's somebody that already had like a bunch of other things against them. But it also depends on what the doctors say, because they will get the medical records to find out the age of the fetus, of how many weeks along. And if the fetus is not as long as it was while they were on those orders under General Order number 1, they don't get persecuted. But that is still a thing, and that scares a lot of people.
So women in the military really can't get pregnant, can't have an abortion either.
They can. The DOD provides abortions when it's rape, incest, or in the if the mother's life is in danger, life and health are in danger. That is when it comes in. Now, I got to point out the rape and incest portion. It's estimated that 1 in 4 military members that identify as female are sexually assaulted during their career, over the whole course of their career. Yep. The most targeted group of sex predators go after those that identify as female, 18 to 24, in their first contract and holding the rank of E4 and below. Guess what group are less likely to re-enlist or not complete their contract? The same group. Now, the thing is, with this demographic, we have, the Sexual Assault Prevention Response DOD team had just released a report, and it said that almost 36,000 people in the military were sexually assaulted last year.
Wow.
Only 8,800 sexual assault reports were filed. Guess how many abortions were performed overall?
I have no idea.
14.
Wow.
14. So that means there's a severe disconnect within the military with their medical care. They're either being turned away, they don't know whether it's available for them, or they do not trust their medical providers with a sensitive situation. And this is scary, because these numbers are pre-Dobbs, pre the overturn of Roe v. Wade. We don't know how this is going to affect after this just yet. So it's pretty scary of everything that's going on. The DOD is not even investigating or trying to find out, or at least they haven't revealed to us that they're trying to find out why only 14 were performed. Sorry, I'm getting really angry about this because a lot of time, because as a woman that wasn't served in the military and have actually stood up for many of my soldiers before when they have to go get medical care, is that they're medically gaslighted. And it happens a lot. And the problem is that they don't know how to or identify it. They don't know how to get help. And a lot of times they need to speak to a patient advocate Patient advocates are in military hospitals and VA hospitals. If you believe that you're not given the care you deserve, if you're being medically gaslit, or honestly you just have a really terrible doctor that is doing very bad things, report them. The VA just became required to have these complaints done online. So then it is tracked online. Before that, it was all behind the scenes paper. I don't know if this is the same for the DOD. And for me, this is very important because that lets us know where all the issues are happening. They can track this. You know me, I'm a data nerd. And all this information can come out so then they can better serve our service members.
So what do you say to people that still have the question, is it murder? Are you taking the life of an unborn child? Or is, for example, there's a website called GotQuestions.org. Now, this is a Christian organization. They state in their explanation, abortion is killing based on a mother's unilateral judgment and choice. Such unprovoked killing of the defenseless is unethical and should define abortion as murder in any society, unless the fetus is not human. So how do you how do you take that into consideration?
To me, it all depends on what a person believes. I was raised on very similar principles and very similar thought process until I became older and had to be in the same situations. And to me, that's one of the reasons why there is such an issue nowadays, is that there is an empathy gap, which explains the reason why men may not understand the reason for reproductive health. For me, it's a fetus. And then when the heartbeat, quote unquote, heartbeat happens around 5 to 6 weeks, doctors have said that is just a clump of cells that have not yet actually formed a heart. It's just like your brain with the neurons punching back and forth, and just with all these cells pumping. So it's not a live baby or a baby until it can come out of the woman and live from it. To me, that is when that's a live baby. That's something. It is murder to kill a child that actually comes out of the woman or the person that can give birth, comes out of there, and that's life.
So would you say then, so would abortion then be would you be okay with an abortion then, say, at month 8 or month 7 of a pregnancy?
See, that's when it gets a little sticky. The thing is that majority of those abortions that happen in that time frame, it's because the life of the mother and or the life of the baby or the fetus is in danger or in severe pain. My frustration with a point that Senator Lindsey Graham pointed out when he put in a bill for a nationwide 15-week abortion ban with 0 exceptions. His reasoning is because that is when a fetus is supposedly pain capable. My issue with his thought process is that if a fetus is so underdeveloped or poorly developed and they can feel the pain that they're having, that will be an excruciating death. To me, that is much more evil than anything. Is to make these fetuses go through that, and it's terrible and it's scary and it's very frustrating. I like to believe more in the Judaism thought process. They believe that life begins at birth. That is their first breath. From there, it's then on it, and that child is supposed to hopefully survive through that. To me, that is what is important.
It's my personal thing. I like to see what science has to say. I think honestly, I know science has been quiet on this topic for the most part.
It's been conflicted. Mm-hmm. It's really been conflicted. And then in Florida, the temples here in Judaism, temples have been filing lawsuits against Florida for the 15-week ban because they believe that it's in violation of their beliefs, which is a interesting conversation against those that are Christian. There's a lot of doctors out there that also are Christian doctors. They're Jewish doctors. There's atheist doctors. So you get a lot of conflicted beliefs and theories and statements.
So what's going on right now with the legislation? What are women's rights advocates doing now to try to, if nothing else, restore back what Roe versus Wade had provided?
Well, first let me add that the VA, since Dobbs, the VA Secretary Dennis McDonough had put in an interim rule. Prior to this, the VA could not perform any abortions nor give abortion counseling, which is very frustrating in states like myself that allow medical exceptions for abortions, but they couldn't get that from their primary care doctor if it was a VA doctor. So he changed that. So it now mirrors the DOD. So they allow abortions for rape, incest, or for the life or health of the mother. There are a lot of Republicans that are threatening lawsuit on this, and I know for at least a few of the Democrat representatives in the VA committee, they say bring it. I'm waiting for them to actually throw down the line. But so that's been running through and going a little bit haywire right now. There's two bills that the women advocates are fighting for, and it's the access to contraception for the VA and for the DOD. Right now, because of Obamacare and a few of the other advances in health care insurance and things like that, civilian women and those that with the capacity to give birth can get contraception for free. People of the military, family members of the military, people that veterans and the veterans' families must pay for it. So that's the first thing that they're still fighting for. This was originally part of the Deborah Sampson Act that got tossed out by the Republicans when the NDA of 2020, I believe, was put together and approved, because it was originally part of that. So they're still trying to get that approved. After that is the March Act. The March Act is to basically protect the reproductive rights of those with capacity to give birth, and have it more to the judgment of the doctors. If the medical doctors believe that this is a decision worth going, that's what they go with. It's the problem is that when we add so many limitations without the advisement of medical professionals, we create so much of a gap that it could actually leave a lot of veterans in the dark, or military people and veterans in the dark.
So what's the solution? How do we advocate to get, I mean, regardless of how you feel about abortion on that topic, but just regular reproductive health, better reproductive health for women in general, and also just more modern and smarter ideas, you would think contraception would be encouraged, because as we know, people are going to do what they're going to do in their bedrooms. So
right.
What do we, so why are we still behind when it comes to the military?
Because certain people in power do not believe that contraception should be free and freely given.
There's such a small, I mean, something that's so cheap. I mean, there's
right.
schools.
It is. And I mean, the VA
feel like withholding water. Like there was a warehouse. I'm not going to name the name of the Fortune 500 company that was making their workers work these long, crazy hours and these really strenuous jobs, and didn't want to provide like water fountains. You know, tell them they got to bring their own bottled water. Yeah.
And the thing it's so frustrating. Well, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas even said, because of the Dobbs decision and everything, he further added to his statement that contraception and the right to choose who gets married could be in question along the same lines.
I don't see how do they make that leap, though? It seems like a big leap. I've heard that before.
It is.
How do you go from, what does abortion have anything to do with? Because you're still not attacking the right necessarily, in my opinion, of privacy per se. That's because privacy, right, the way the court defined it, is really two separate issues. So it went from a privacy issue to basically a murder issue.
Right. What bothers me is because Roe v. Wade was won because of the right to privacy from the 14th Amendment. And that type of thing, that argument was made. My issue with the Dobbs decision is that they did not attack or properly address the privacy issue either. the privacy issue is also applied to whoever you sleep with in the bedroom. And this was also decided, I believe, it with another case that happened in the 2000s. And it's so frustrating because some of the states that allow exception for rape, they require you to file a police report. Mm-hmm. If I have the right of privacy to who I sleep with in the bedroom, I should have the right of privacy of my sexual history of having a rape and not have to disclose that to anyone. So to me, that is just so frustrating and awful.
But to me, the way I read the decisions is it seemed like they address privacy to the extent of you have privacy up until you affect someone else's life. So once again, it's getting away from the idea that the question is about privacy versus when does your privacy have a limit? If you take your partner into a closed room and you kill him, that's murder. The same thing if you're pregnant and you kill an unborn child, that child is a human life, therefore it's murder. But we don't know that's where to me where it kind of fell off, is where we don't know when life begins or when life ends. We'll let the states figure it out. So every state can do their own thing. And like you mentioned, most states that have the stricter abortion rules are going to be in places where there's higher military population. They tend to be in rural areas. They tend to be in mostly red states. They tend to be where military veterans or military service members have bases, where we have bases, whether it be Marines, Air Force, whatever.
Yeah, to me, that I draw the line is if the fetus is self-sufficient. A lot of people argue that, when you have a sunflower seed, it's still a seed. It's not a sunflower. Mm-hmm. It has to be planted. It has to be tendered. It has to be grown. And then it becomes a sunflower. So to me, self-sustaining life is where the line is for me on where it goes for whether life or murder. It's very frustrating when a lot of things happen with that type of argument there. The craziest thing is that the anti-abortion movements did not start until the mid-1850s, at least in the U.S., and it was actually originally organized by a bunch of doctors that were not gynecological specialists, which back then were midwives, doulas, what have you. They looked down upon those occupations that had gone through the gynecological subjects. And so that is really the birthplace of it. A lot of people don't realize that some of the founding fathers were actually pro-abortion or pro-choice. And even Benjamin Franklin had made I think 2 recipes of how to bring about of an abortion, his own tonic that he had actually written up and said that would work to help cause that. So if a woman did not want to be pregnant, they could use that. And it was actually a highly regarded United Kingdom book.
Mm-hmm. But then again, you could also argue that, these same guys, a lot of them kept slaves. So, I mean.
Right. So Benjamin Franklin he didn't have slaves, but he believed in air baths instead of water baths. Right. So.
Yeah, a lot of that. People. This is another thing we talk about, and this we might respect this idea, but because of what you do with the legislative voice, the thing of it is this idea of going always back to the founding fathers as if they had clairvoyant, supernatural vision of what life in America would be like in 2020. And they would understand. So let's go back to what the founding fathers intended. Once again, this is not a kingdom where we're trying to honor what the king wanted way back when he gave birth to the nation. No, this is our nation now. We should be doing what should be done right today. Those guys were doing the best they could with the resources that they had back in those times. Those guys did not intend for everything to be the status quo, or even for the new interpretations of what they wrote to not be considered today. Yep, no kidding. And I do want to pivot to one thing, is that a lot of things that happens for women veterans. The top service-connected conditions are PTSD, musculoskeletal issues, depression, migraines, that's me, gynecological issues like PCOS and endometriosis. Majority of these conditions, their treatments are incompatible with a pregnancy. The problem is that there's a lot of damaging effects that can happen when they're abruptly cut off from these treatments, and they could die by not getting these treatments. But then they can also, and the frustrating part is they served their country, volunteered to sacrifice their lives
developed these service-connected conditions, and now a fetus is more worthy than their own life because of the situation they find themselves in. That's where I get frustrated and where I get very angry, is that my life is chosen over a ball of cells that are not self-sufficient yet.
And the thing is also in the military life in general, particularly in certain occupations in the military for women, it seems that you're putting your body in certain types of risks that may make a pregnancy just not something that will be very viable.
Right, and it's very frustrating. Tammy Duckworth has said that the government was perfectly willing for me to sacrifice my periods, because where she was being served in Iraq, they were not going to have the feminine products that she needs for her periods. So they gave her medications to suppress her periods. And so she did that for the good of the country. And then she sacrificed her limbs. She sacrificed her limbs for this country. And now that they want to take away her right to choose whether to be a mother or not, which of course she is, the first, senator to give birth while she's still in office. And those type of things is a very complicated situation. Don't get me wrong. I love kids. I take care of a lot of soldiers. I really love kids. So I want to make sure that nobody labels me as a baby killer.
I don't think anybody would. The thing of it is that, it is a complicated issue. A lot of people refer to this question today. They kind of relate it to slavery back in the 1800s and 1700s, because it's such a moral question, and it really challenges our ideas about life and who's a person, who's not a person. And then, but also at the same time, it challenges, it's at the end of the day, it's still a question about freedom. It's about personal liberties and what you do with your body and so on. I still have a hard time trying to make that jump from guys like Clarence Thomas and these guys trying to say that, well, now we're going to look at, same-sex marriages. Now we're going to look at, because that to me is a totally different topic. How do we jump from murder to, so now you're coming back to the issue of privacy when you're trying to run from it from one direction, but now you're going back to it into something that's totally unrelated. I don't see that going anywhere.
And these officials don't understand the complexities of medical care. When I was watching one of the hearings that they had a couple of weeks ago, and Lindsay Church from the Minority Veterans of America was there, it was an amazing hearing. So I encourage everybody to go. Reproductive Health, House Committee on Veterans Affairs. And so the the elected official did not understand why a mental health professional needs to be part of the abortion counseling. And I'm like, majority of our veterans, men and women, have PTSD, anxiety, depression. You cut them off from those medications, they can become aggressive. They can become suicidal. I mean, and suicide is already a crazy issue with veterans. And just trying to complicate this, it's frustrating that these type of people don't understand. There was an official from Indiana that thought that you could take a baby out by an endoscopy. Wow. Which you can't, by the way. They didn't understand, and Governor Abbott of Texas...
That sounds about right, though, when you talk about senators. I mean, most people in politics don't know what the hell they're talking about. They don't understand economics. They don't understand medicine. They don't understand science. They fight everything, and that leads me to this point. And I believe, truthfully, I think honestly, a lot of the pro-lifers in politics are just using that as a banner to run under so they can get elected. A lot of these guys are hypocrites. We've Herschel Walker, for example, just got busted because the mother of his child had an abortion. He's like one of the staunchest pro-lifers out there. But a lot of these guys are using it as a banner to get elected. They're using it because they know if you stay on pro-life, and you say it on national television, say it on the radio, say it on the social media, you're going to get the conservative right to vote for you.
Yes, and all those that are pro-birth and everything down that road, I said, I hope that your children are not in the same position that I found myself in, and many other women have found themselves in, where they needed an abortion to live, to lead successful, happy lives, and then when they can have kids, they will have the happy, healthy environment for those children.
Stephanie, I appreciate your time. We're out of time today. Stephanie Collada, the Veterans Legislative Voice. Great for your time. Thanks for all the words and also wisdom that you brought us today, and also keep up the work.
Thank you so much, Sean. Love everybody. Thank you, Glenda.
This is Sean Claiborne signing off with America's Heroes Group. We are going to be back again next Saturday at 4 o'clock. If you want to reach out to America's Heroes Group, we read the address always, but I know the one thing you want to hear about is our website. That's americashg.org. Check us out on our website. Go to YouTube and also see all the things that you have missed in previous episodes. We have an archive of tons of data, tons of information. Our address is 155 North Rocker Drive, Suite 4250, Chicago, Illinois, 60606. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.